story. Brad called me. When did you call me for coffee, Brad?
What's that? Oh,
Probably last spring,
yeah,
but
right.
it was kind of cold.
Late March, yeah.
He said, I know you work for the AIER, American Institute for Economic Research, and they have these Bastiat societies, and I said, I know them well. Let's start one in Raleigh, he said. And I thought, why not? And so I said, let's meet for like 30 minutes. I'll have coffee, remember?
Yeah.
2.5 hours later. So right back at you. It was really fascinating. I mean, you can't start these from scratch, not really. There's a little help from Great Barrington, but it's we need money, we need a list, and we need some speakers. So what do you got? And he's got a big pad of paper, and I just started taking notes. But you already had notes. You had bylaws there. I'm so grateful that you started it. We had last month John Allison from BB&T speaking. Okay, so, and also, yes, thank you, John Locke Foundation, for hosting us. I've written this book called Where Have All the Capitalists Gone? This is my fun. And a couple of things I want to say tonight, and then I really would like to hear from you. So Q&A, I think we're supposed to be 6 to 7 and then have another cocktail party, so I want to attend that as well.
Yeah.
And also I have free books. So afterwards, there's some books, first come, first serve. I'm hoping people will be clawing over each other to get it. And, but there are books back there. Take them on the way out. Look at that, the cocktail party. I use the word capitalist 2 ways. So if you said, I have a socialist friend, you'd say, a socialist friend. This must be an advocate of socialism. Yes, that's what a socialist is. But if I said I know a capitalist in town, you'd probably say he's a banker or a venture capitalist, like John Allison. You would not think an advocate of capitalism, and that's one of the tragedies, I think. That's one of the things I write about. Why can't there be capitalists who are pro-capitalism? So part of what I'm saying when I say where have all the capitalists gone is where have all the advocates of the system called capitalism, where have they gone? We know what the bankers and financiers are, they're still here. So that's a little play on words, but that also involves saying in the book what the heck capitalism is, and then what a capitalist is, because there's a lot of misinterpretations of what these things are. So I'll talk about that a little bit. So that's attached to the title, and it's also, by the way, called Essays in Moral Political Economy. So Mitch Kokai, who interviewed me just before this, asked me, what is this moral political economy stuff? And it opens up a kind of interesting angle to this book. Political economy is the intersection of politics and economics, which it kind of suggests you can't just study economics alone or politics alone, but how they interact with each other. And of course, in a trend where the government is getting more involved in the economy, you need to know that even more than ever. So I'm in academia and I see these little siloed departments, this kid majors in econ, and this kid majors in poli-sci, and this girl majors in philosophy, and they almost don't ever talk to each other. And the professors themselves will be presenting material in a way that's compartmentalized. And I don't think you can understand social systems, let alone capitalism, that way. You have to understand all 3 of them, but it's hard to understand all 3 of them. Economics, politics, and moral arguments, not easy. So I'm in a program at Duke, very grateful to Mike Munger, who was supposed to be here tonight. Mike Munger and I met 2006. He's at Duke and he heads the PP&E program there. What does PP&E stand for? Philosophy, Politics, and Economics. So it has a specific program geared to the idea that these disciplines should be studied in interaction with each other. So you can be an advocate of PP&E and yet not be pro-capitalist. I would say, for example, Karl Marx was PP&E. He would talk about philosophy and he would talk about politics and he would talk about economics, but he hated capitalism. So another rare combination would be to have someone who knows PP&E and is pro-capitalist. That's also a rare combination. Every time I see people on book tours, I have 3 questions in my mind, and they almost never answer them. One of them is, why should I buy that book? Why should I read that book? And the 3 things hi Cynthia.
Hello.
I'm glad you picked up. Good to see you. I always ask, is it relevant? Is it distinctive? And is it provocative? So now relevant. I think it's very relevant. Where have all the capitalists gone? Because we're moving away from capitalism. And I'll talk a little more about what that is. But the last 20 years, I think, the country and the world is moving away from freedom, liberalism, constitutionally limited government, capitalism. And here's the weird part. For those of you old enough to remember, and I do see some gray hairs here, but you know that from 1980 to 2000, it was going the other way. Reagan, Thatcher, Mulroney up in Canada, the whole what's later called the neo-liberal movement, that was a good word by the way, liberal meant for freedom, the new case for liberty made by those folks and the ones I'll talk about that came before them. We were moving toward capitalism. There's no doubt about it. From 1980 to 2000, we were moving toward capitalism. It wasn't completely free market. But there was ideological cases made, there were political revolutions done. What happened in the middle of that? The Soviet Union disbanded. The Soviet Union fell. America won the Cold War, as Thatcher said, without firing a single shot. That's incredible. Incredible. But why? And then why, after all that success, would it go the other way in the last 20 years, which I think is obvious. There's been three main crises: 9/11, financial crisis of '08, the recent COVID thing, all blamed on what? Not on government mismanagement, but on capitalism. The greed of Wall Street, the imperialism of America, that was 9/11. It's our fault, not their fault. COVID, these lockdowns, these authoritarian reactions to a pandemic, which is not all that serious. There's an authoritarian trend we're seeing, which is very, very troubling. And the question is why, what to do about it. So I think the relevance is there. Capitalism is under attack. I have a book out there, Defending Capitalism. And then the question is how? So the second part of the book I want to hear about is it distinctive? Is it different? Is anyone else saying this? Most people are really shy about defending capitalism. I hate to say it. And the book actually isn't geared to left-wing socialists. It's geared to people on the right. It's written for conservatives and libertarians and some objectivists who don't get it either. And I'm basically saying you guys need to be a lot less timid, a lot less shy about defending this system. You need to be as bold and as morally certain as the enemies are. And the idea is not to be anti-socialist, but pro-capitalist. Very different, very hard to do. Remember the president, not the prior president, Trump, said in a speech in front of Congress, America will never become a socialist country. Remember that? It was famous. Because AOC and others were on the rise. And America will never become and when I heard that, I thought, that's good, I can endorse that. But notice the defensiveness. Socialism is winning, this wave is coming at us. Stop. But what if he had said, America must become a capitalist country? One, he wouldn't have said it. But two, I'm not sure what people mean about that. And this is what I mean about you need to be on offense. If a football team fielded only a defensive side, they might win the game, but you need an offensive side too, and you mostly need an offensive side. You need both. So why is the book distinctive? A couple things. One, it has that PP&E approach. If you read this book, if you're an economist, you'll read this book and you'll say, wow, the economics in this is really good. It's sound, it's free market, it's Mises, it's Hayek. And then there'll be an essay on the morals of capitalism. And you'll say, I have no idea I don't deal with morals, I'm an economist. But the point is, then you read an essay or a section on morals, and you think, well, capitalism needs this too, needs this moral defense. Now, if you're a philosopher and you're reading it, you would probably dismiss the moral argument because you don't want to hear about self-interest, you don't want to hear about egoism. You don't want to hear about rational self-interest, but also you would know nothing about economics. That's my experience with most philosophers. They know nothing about economics. They get a little economics in there, but even the politics of it. Today, the politics is moving towards statism. Literally, unrestricted by statism, I mean the broader term, idolatry of the state. The individual supporting themselves to the state. There are so many versions of this. Socialism, communism, fascism, democratic socialism. There are many ways to be anti-capitalist. There aren't that many ways to be pro-capitalist, is one of my themes. So one of the last sections actually is varieties of anti-capitalism. There are so many varieties, sad to say. There are so many people attacking it from all angles, and so few people defending it. So the book is distinctive, I think, because of this PP&E approach. It's also distinctive because it's pro-capitalist. But now let's move on to the provocative part of it. It's hard to be provocative. I don't think I'm actually very provocative, but provocative means provoke. You know, shake someone by the lapel. Listen to this. This is different. This is not something you would hear every day. This system we love is under attack. So wake up. Talk about woke. People being woke. Truly become woke. Truly become awakened to this case. And so there are very many provocative essays in there. But one for example. You know, you hear this argument all the time. The problem with capitalism is these cronies lobby Washington, and they're distorting the system. Some libertarians will say this, actually. They'll say, Richard, you can't be defending capitalism. Capitalism is a system of, by, and for the capitalists. And I don't believe that. I don't think that's true, but it's a very common view. And but there's a case where it just has to be refuted. It's just not something that's valid. It's just not a way of looking at capitalism. But you only hear about crony capitalism. You never hear about crony socialism or crony fascism. Or as I say to my students, if democratic socialism is okay, it isn't. Well, how about democratic fascism? What is it about democracy, majority rule? We all voted for it. That whitewashes what comes after. And they almost never say, no, I wouldn't be for democratic fascism. Why not? If we vote for it, that's actually where the country's going. The government is not taking the means of production. It's not nationalizing things, is it? But that's what socialism is. What is fascism? It's a hybrid system where you still retain your private property, but government tells you how to run it. I hate to say it, that's what fascism is. You don't need jackboots, you don't need slave labor camps, you don't need Auschwitz to say, my gosh, we're moving toward fascism. But that's what's happening. Anyway, one of the more provocative essays, I think, is to get money out of politics, get politics out of money making. Now get that, what I'm saying. They're complaining that the cronies are lobbying government. They're blaming basically capitalists and rich people for the state we're in. I'm saying that if there's money in Washington, it's because Washington has too much power. They're diverting and redirecting, 50% of the wealth in the country. I think those with wealth might have some interest in this and would want to knock on the door, oh, Congressman, hello, I'm trying to lobby you. Okay, if you want to get rid of that, if you want to diminish that, as even the Ralph Naders of the world claim they do, you need to shrink the size and scope and power of government. If they're influence peddling, you need to get rid of the influence. That's what's happening. But I'm telling you, I know people on the right who say, Richard, the problem is rent seeking. The problem is these corporate lobbying types are paying, and bribing officials. I'm saying, you need to look at it the other way around. They're being extorted. The politicians have power. They're selling favors. They won't say this because it doesn't sound very good, but they're selling favors. And we need to stop that. We need to have government go back to treating people equally. A couple of things about the big names. Where have all the capitalists gone? My beautiful wife Lisa heard this talk once, and she said, you never really told them where they went. So could you please tell them this time? Well, okay, now here's what I'm thinking about. I mentioned some of these, right, on the way to getting rid of socialism and the way toward the great 2 decades of 1980 to 2000. But here's the names I remember, and I recount in the book. Intellectuals like Carl Snyder, who in 1940 wrote Capitalism, the Creator. And it's just an incredible book that almost no one knows anything about. But soon after that, The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand in 1943. Soon after that, Mises, Hayek, Hazlitt, Friedman, Robert Nozick up at Harvard in 1974. It's a long time ago. 1974, the only Harvard professor who ever came out for limited government and libertarianism. James Buchanan. There are more names than that, but there are about 10 or 12 real giants of liberty coming from various directions. Some of them are economists, some of them are constitutionalists, some of them are philosophers, but the point is, what a powerful set of ideas, and we haven't built on them. It's just sad to say that heirs of those giants have not really come up and cashed in and built on what they achieved, and there's various reasons for that we can talk about. But in effect, answering Lisa, they're in their graves. Sad to say, all those people are gone. They're dead. And there really aren't that many giants of their stature since. And that's a problem. That's a question that we have to answer. Mitch and I talked about earlier in the interview. He said, so how do these capitalists work together? One of my themes is the financial capitalists need to meet the ideological capitalists and shake hands and do something. And they tend not to. Now, this is a good group. This is John Locke Foundation doing great work in North Carolina, trying to advance classical liberal ideas and policies. And what do they have to do? They have to get donors. So thankfully, they have donors who care about the free society. I have the same issue at Duke. I'm a minority at Duke, not by skin color, but by ideology. And we have to get funded. We have to get people who believe in free market ideas to help us. Duke has been very good to me and very good to the liberals and the good science, pro-liberty people in the university. And so they're more diversified than the average university, but most universities are not diversified at all. So that's another theme, that the capitalists financially have to join with the capitalists ideologically, and they tend not to. Okay, I have to tell you something that about 5 years ago, five years ago, Mike Munger called me up and he said, you tired of teaching yet? I said, no. You want to teach something new? Yeah. Create a course from scratch and get back to me in a week. That was nice. He said, not a course, a seminar just for freshmen, only 18 can go. Now that is called a seminar at Duke. It's actually a little more intimate, a little nicer if you can teach a seminar. Not a lot of grading, Brad, not doing a lot of grading. But at a conference table, no lecturing, at a conference table, discussing big ideas. So I opened up my blank piece of paper and I wrote Capitalism For and Against. That was the seminar. But it had to get past the curriculum committee. But Capitalism For and Against, I thought, I'm going to give them, half the semester will be these tremendous arguments for capitalism, and half the course will be capitalism sucks. It's Marx, it's Keynes, it's the environmentalists, and it's going to go back and forth each week, and the students are just, maybe their heads will be spinning a little bit, but they're going to get pro-con. Now, someone on the curriculum committee called me and they said, what is this pro stuff? And here I am thinking, I'm balanced. Aren't we all for balance? Bipartisan. That's how I wrote it, for and against. Who can be for? Are there really that many for arguments? But that's how I taught it. It's really become really popular, and it sells out every time. I think I've taught it 4 times in a row. And it's one of the things I have in the book. Not this story I just told you, but one of the things in the book is a chapter, basically, now imagine, it's a chapter with an exhibit that does the following, and it's an exhibit the students have to fill out as they're going through the semester. Now, here's what the exhibit says. Columns. What is capitalism? Is it moral? Is it practical? Is it sustainable? So the first author is Marx. What is capitalism? The system where capitalists, bleed the laborers dry and suck out all their stuff. Is it moral? Of course it's not moral, it's egoistic, it's profit-seeking. Is it sustainable? No, it's going to crash and burn once the workers figure out they're being exploited. So now can you imagine going through everything? Okay, now Keynes. What did Keynes think capitalism was? I won't go through the gory details. Well, then conservatives. Conservatives, our side. Libertarians. Objectivists. Back to the enemies, environmentalists. Like, would an environmentalist say it's sustainable? No, the planet's going to burn up. Apparently in 12 years, according to AOC. Not sustainable, right? So it's interesting. Various angles. It's not sustainable for this reason or that reason. But why would you endorse a system that's not sustainable? Let alone whether it's immoral. Like, so some of them will say, you know what, it's really practical. This thing produces the goods. My God, it's a cornucopia of prosperity, but it's immoral. Why? Because the prosperity is unequally received. Actually, my only take on this, you can imagine, if you know my views, there's only one group, the objectivists mostly, who say capitalism is a system of private property and individual rights. It's moral because it's based on self-interest. That's controversial. It's practical because it's based on self-interest. because self-interested people will want to improve their lives and their businesses. Now the sustainable part's interesting. Why would it be sustainable? Because it's practical and moral. Because it's both of those things. It's producing the goods and people like it. But that most other groups, and the last two are environmentalists and feminists. Feminism is in there, enemy of capitalism. So that's an example of me learning something at Duke by teaching these students, and then I realized I don't really know that about capital. Oh, I put that on the syllabus. I don't really know that. Then I read my own material and get better at it. And then they question me because they're smarties, but most of them are not pro-capitalist. Oh, if I say PP&E, so I'm talking about philosophy, politics, and economics. Let me just say right off the bat, and this is in the book, the three buddies for me in philosophy, it's Ayn Rand. In politics, it's Alexander Hamilton. And in economics, it's Jean-Baptiste Say. But just go to the index and you'll see me quoting them all the time. That is so obvious. All right, let me summarize here. Our side is timid, on the defensive, on their heels. The other side is so morally certain, and they have no basis for it. It's disgusting what they actually advocate, what they believe. If anyone knows anything about the history of statism, it is such a gory mess of inhumanity. And then one of the things I actually say in the book is, this will sound very left-wing soft to you. Capitalism is the best habitat for humanity. I think that's Jimmy Carter's group. They build houses for poor people. But I love that phrase, habitat for humanity. Capitalism is the humane system. It's based on human nature. It's not making stuff up. You know, so if you think fish out of water, why is that a problem? Fish not in water, not in the habitat necessary for a fish to survive, right? I'm trying to portray capitalism that way. However people feel uncomfortable with its dimensions, it's the most wonderful habitat for humanity. Now, if you're for human beings, if you're a human being for humans, I hope you are, you would want this system, and you would not be irresolute about endorsing it. And that's really what I'm working toward. I know it seems like an appeal to the humanitarians, but to me, a truly humanitarian person would want to be endorsing for and fighting a system that's really good for humans. You know, human flourishing, human prosperity, human joy and happiness. So that's a theme in there as well. Capitalism, the habitat for humanity. I'll stop there. We should talk about questions and comments. And let me know what you think. I hope you get the book. Since there's 20 free copies in the back, you should be able to get the book. There's no excuse not to. If you like it, write a review on Amazon. Amazon tells me that reviews apparently boost sales. I don't know why they would, but if they do, that's fine. That's good. Anyway, thanks for coming.
Well,
Let me hear what you have to say.
We're just going to open it up to questions, Richard.
Okay.
So shoot away. We have time, and
We're
then we're going
to 7.
yeah,
So we have about
and then we're
20.
going to enjoy some drinks, and everybody
Great.
can make their way home.
I'll ask the question.
Yes.
Unless you
No,
we're
go
pointing
ahead.
at somebody else.
No.
So we've been kind of using the phrase free market and free enterprise
Yeah.
recently to avoid the term capitalism.
Very much so, yeah.
It seems to be more effective when you can talk about those things
Is it though?
Well, it depending on who you're talking to. So you can kind of avoid the stigma. Now, I could be wrong about this, but I had heard somewhere, I don't know if this is correct or not, that it was Marx who coined the phrase capitalism to denigrate free enterprise and free markets.
So my first thing is that when you say stigma, I'm really curious to hear, why do you think the word capitalism, because I agree actually, it does, has a stigma that free enterprise wouldn't?
And not because I believe it has a stigma, because
Yeah.
I don't really think it does. But it's been portrayed as that so frequently, and because the left have taken over so many of our institutions, invaded, taken over, kicked everybody else out, both in K through 12, colleges, entertainment, news, media.
Agreed.
They've
Agreed.
taken over just about everything, and
Agreed, yeah.
they portray their own view and use their own terminology to supplant, everybody else's terminology, as you know.
So that's a good question. So part of the sequence I have seen is capitalists are terrible, exploiting, blood-sucking. It's actually fun to read Marx because he uses all this ad hominem stuff, but it's not scientific at all. Okay, but if that's true, if the capitalist is evil, then the system, capitalism, must be evil because this thing is evil. I think that's the stigma, and it has to be rejected. Instead of throwing out the name, we have to go back to the roots. And by the way, the opening essay of the book, the etymology of capital, like where the word comes from. If I said baseball cap, or the captain of a team, or a capital of a nation, or decapitation, it all has to do with the head. The Latin root is head. And I think capitalism is a system of brains. I don't mean everyone's a brainiac. I mean, if the essence of human nature is the rational animal, as Aristotle said, and you really need to protect this feature of humanity, namely, let people think. Let people think things through, let people create. We're not bodies, physicalists. That was the Marxist view. Remember, the labor theory of value was only manual labor creates wealth. They didn't believe white-collar workers made anything. They think all of you are parasites. You're not getting your fingers dirty. You're not on the assembly line. You're not digging a ditch. You got a white collar on. You're on Wall Street, especially finance. They hate because that's even more abstract. That's even more remote from this. But the actual person who coined it was not Marx. Believe it or not, it was a guy named Louis Blanc, Louis White, in France. He was a socialist, and absolutely right. He said capitalism is terrible. But he was the first to say, you know what? 1850. Well, not that long ago. He said, there's this system, and I'm going to call it an ism, and it helps these people who have capital, invest capital, hire people, make stuff. But he was a socialist. And so it's true that the enemies gave us the name, but I don't think there's any reason to throw out the name. And I think that the whole idea of, let's call it free enterprise, is a bit that's my whole point. Don't be defensive about this. The free enterprise approach, frankly, the most conservatives take, let's call it free enterprise.